Welcome back to Gaslighting the Warfighter. We are honored, my friends, to share the program with Congressman Mike Bost. He is the ranking member of the House Veteran Affairs Committee. He is joining us today as a veteran, as well as a individual that is largely trying to solve this problem from his position, from inside the HVAC, as well as his influences inside of Congress. So I want to welcome to the program, Congressman. Thank you for joining us today in this important conversation, and we have a lot to talk about.
Well, thank you. And, the main reason that people that know me know how passionate I am about my position as chairman of the VA. My dad and his brothers were all Army. My grandfather, the one grandfather I didn't know, Second World War Navy. The grandfather I did know on the side was a Marine, Korean War veteran. An uncle who was a Marine that was a victim of the ultimate oxymoron, friendly fire. He did live, and he has had a very successful life thanks to the VA. I was a Marine Corps corporal. I was an electronics specialist, radar repairman during peacetime. My son is a lieutenant colonel today. He is a JAG, and he is now a reservist. He was active for many years. And then my grandson, not his child, but my daughter's child, he just got out of the Corps. He was a corporal when he got out. He was an F-18 mechanic. So you can say it's kind of personal to me.
Absolutely. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
So we're proud to have you here, Chairman Bost. We've been having this conversation about medications, overprescribing, talking about the VA's annual suicide report. We met earlier last year and we had a discussion. You became very impassioned about this topic. And Tim Jensen, myself, the veterans community as a whole are grateful for that, as many of us have been overprescribed ourselves or had a bad experience with one of these treatments. And it's not to say all drugs are bad, but there are some issues going on. And we've had panels with the VFW, American Legion, DAV, a series of organizations, all who have resolutions on the books calling for action as it relates to this issue for informed consent, reform deprescribing guidelines, safer practices as a whole, and for the VA to share more information for the public and Congress as it relates to prescribing and veteran suicides. Are you surprised at all? Were you surprised when you learned about the 68% prescription rate at the VHA for all veterans who are treated there of psychiatric drugs, and 28% prescription rate of antidepressants for veterans under care of the VHA?
Yeah, I felt that I'm not really surprised by those numbers, but when they came out, and this is everything besides opioids. You remember when the opioid situation, and we worked so hard to get off because it doesn't cure the problem; it numbs the problem, and we need to. When a lot of our veterans, when they leave the military. Sometimes it isn't the things that happen in the military, it's the sudden drop-off of not being in a coordinated setting. And so when we look at mental health issues with our veterans, we're not winning the game. And the reason we're not winning the game is because you're trying the same old thing over and over again, and here, take a pill, you'll be great. No, you don't. You take a pill and it's not dealing with the true base problem. And so in answer to your question, it doesn't surprise me because that doesn't mean there aren't some good employees at VA. Don't mean that. But the docs, all of a sudden, if they get a routine and says, hey, I treated this person over here like this, I know I can give them this medicine and just keep them on it. And then I'll be done with this and I'll move on. That's not what they need. They need long time, and we're not winning the game. The numbers for suicide, they changed. They went from 21 to 17, but I think those numbers are counted wrong. And that's because everything isn't always reported as a suicide that is a suicide. The stigma that goes with the family, okay, I drove my car off a cliff, whatever, then that's not being reported well. The reporting factor that the VA that you're asking for is something we need to get. I hope with the new secretary we can, because the answer is not putting somebody on drugs and leaving them on drugs forever. The answer is finding out what their situation was that caused them to go into this state of mental health, okay? And it's not a one size fits all. So we need to know the person. And, another issue that's dealt with it with the mental health is, look, our veteran homeless rate. Quite often when we're dealing with homeless veterans, we've got to really study, did that veteran become homeless because of poor money management? Did he or she become homeless because of a mental issue? Or did he or she become homeless because she got involved with drugs? Are they now involved with drugs because of the other issues? And so, and we're trying to work with VA to have programs that are focused on getting people cured.
Yes, sir. You're looking at one veteran that became homeless after being prescribed a drug cocktail of meds by the VA. So there's one statistic right there.
And unless the VA can come to you while you're homeless and then figure out what your need is, what got you there in the first place, get that straightened out, get you back where you're back an active part of society, working, but dealing with the mental health issue in the right way, not, searching for the next thing to numb you out.
Yes, sir.
But, Chairman Bost, the relationship that the VA has created over the years with these prescriptions and the strategies that they've been using to deploy them within the veteran space has been, rather interesting to watch. Right, we've seen connections with agencies and developers like Ricketts and Coleman or Endeavor, who they became to be, that have used the VA as a testing ground for their opioids and opioid abatement drugs, and have created a large opioid problem, as we've seen in the early 90s. Now, and then we're seeing some of this very similar things that are happening with the relationships they have today with trazodone and Zoloft and these other readily accessible drugs that they seem to just pass out like candy at the VA. What are we doing to be, from an investigative aspect or a regulatory aspect that is looking at some of these relationships to understand, like, what is the relationship there that is creating these behaviors? Right.
That's where our oversight should get involved. Okay, but we have to have a VA that's open to allow us to truly get their true numbers. Where are the areas where they're prescribing more? What VA facility prescribes the most? What is the key drug? What's the tie between the manufacturer of that drug and the VA facility? All of these things are things we've got to look at, but we've also got to have a VA that will be open with us. Remember, we've spent the last 4 years, the last 2 years on our side, because we couldn't get anything done from the request for the first 2 years, but trying to request information and it never comes. And you can even put it in a law and say it has to be done on a certain date. And so many of the people at the VA think that the law is a suggestion, not fact. And so that's a whole lot of us having to do our job of oversight.
How has it got so politicized inside of the system that
here's what I told the secretary that's here now, okay? And I've known him for quite some time. And there was a problem that we had a public hearing on, and it was dealing with the fact that that they had paid bonuses to the higher executives when the bonuses were supposed to go to the doctors, the nurses, all of this, but they paid these real high bonuses and then they got caught. When he came to try to defend them and did not fire them, I said, here's what I want you to know, Mr. Secretary. The deep state is real. The employees that you're dealing with know that if they just wait it out, I may not be elected anymore, and then they can move on and they can keep doing what they're doing, and then we're not in their way. But then I also looked at him and I said, but I've only been here 10 years and I've seen 5 of you. So they do the same thing to them. That's the problem we have to cure. We need to take back control, understand, look, it's like I said right off the start, the VA was not created for the bureaucrats at VA. The VA is created for the veterans. And the only way that you can do the veterans right, not only in this instance, but everything else, is know what's happening, know what our veterans need, and deliver in a way that truly deals with whatever their issue was. Remember, DOD's job is to go out and fight our wars. okay? Our job is try to fix what they break to the best of our ability. And that can be with your with wounds that you can see and wounds that you can't see. And we got some of the best docs in the VA. We just got to get them focused, and we can only do that when we do the oversight like we're talking about here. Doing the monitoring, know how many of these drugs they're issuing out, why did they start issuing them out, what's the long-term effects. All of these things is what we need to do, and need to bring the experts from there to us to talk, but also have accurate numbers on the distribution and how many people are prescribing.
I've seen some of the interaction between your office and the VA and how those responses go. I'm glad to know that it's not just me and the Grunt Style Foundation that get gaslit. Unfortunate to see that it's Congress and the House Veterans Affairs Committee receiving that same response, unfortunately.
We've had to, for the first time in about 8 years, this last year, we've had to have subpoena them twice. Now, unfortunately, even with the subpoena, they ignore it, because if you violate a subpoena, it's up to the legal office of jurisdiction, which ends up being DC's attorney, and they don't prosecute them. So, but it does get it on public record that we've subpoenaed them. Now, like I said, I don't think I'm going to have that with the next secretary, but the secretary will also have to know that he has underlings that can keep this information from him unless he keeps dead straddle of him, and I believe Doug will.
In 2010, the House Veterans Affairs Committee held hearings titled Exploring the Relationship Between Medications and Veteran Suicides. Today, the Grunt Style Foundation, we've been hosting summits across the country that are named of the same name of this 2010 House Vets Affairs Committee hearing. And we've been bringing experts, we've been bringing in folks who have got these lived experiences. We've got a veteran who took his life after being in Wellbutrin for 8 days, had no mental health condition going in, was in there for a foot injury and a eye test. And they screened him for depression and tested positive for moderate depression.
And gave him a drug that actually put him over the edge.
He wasn't even on the edge. This kid was a student veteran at Montana Tech, and he was excelling in life. He was excited about the future ahead of him. He was not suicidal at all. And 8 days later, after a prescription, he's gone. And so we've been looking at these conversations. We've been having these experts come forward, and we've been finding 3.5 times increased risk of suicide for those prescribed antidepressants, 2.4, 2.6 increased risk for attempts of suicide. We've got all these stories, just this countless parade of horror stories. The question I'd like to ask is, we had these hearings in 2010. Do you feel like today, 14 years later, 15 years later, do you feel like we're in this place where we need to re-explore this issue?
I think we should re-explore it. I think we're in a better place than we were with opioids, but now it's a different drugs, okay? Opioids were the one that everybody raised the red flags on, and it was not only at VA, it was everywhere, overprescribing. Now the question, I would love to have a hearing because on stuff like this, one thing is, this is what you're checking out, and we're talking about veterans right now, but what do we know about the drugs that they're prescribing for people who are not veterans? Does it get the same effect? So is it the drug that is putting them there, or is it some other factor involved? And your research and your conversation with others is a tremendous help to us. And so, yes, I would love to try to reach back out and figure out, okay, with not opioids, but it's this type of drug.
Yes, sir. We'd be proud to support you in any way we can. We've had a lot of allies coming forward, VFW, DV, American Legion, Jewish War Vets, VVA, down the list of all past resolutions calling for actions as it relates to this issue. And we're just excited where we're at today because this has gone on for so many years. And every day that goes by is another unnecessary tragedy had the patient been properly informed of the risks of the medications they were prescribed.
And that's a whole lot of the, another issue we've got out there, though, is so many of the people that we lose veterans that we lose to suicide do not know what's available to them at the VA, or their first experience out of the military with the VA was not a good one, and they would rather go anywhere but. And that's real scary.
Absolutely. Now, Chairman, you mentioned your excitement, the potential of Doug Collins coming online as the next Secretary of the VA, and I think there is a lot of excitement, to that possibility. I'm curious to know from the Chairman's position, what are some of the things that you would expect to see within the first 90 to 120 days of opportunity that is addressing suicide, addressing some of these overprescribing?
Yeah, that can be worked on. There's no problem there. But some of the key issues, one, because suicide is always what we're trying to stop. Another one is to make sure that the Mission Act, which is the act that allows the veteran to make a choice to not wait on VA, but actually go out in the community and receive some help, regardless of what that issue is. And quite often, they're so far away from a VA. But unfortunately, we've got several people in and throughout this nation and the world, while trying to implement the Mission Act. If you're in one visit area, maybe they're doing it fairly well, but you're in another one and they're not doing it right at all. And we've got to go oversight for that. At the same time, when we're going to our community care and things like that, remember, we passed the Elizabeth Dole Act, but then I and our committee has to hold the feet to the fire of the VA. Like I said, a lot easier now because it is a friendly group that we work with over there now with Doug going in. But making sure the Dole Act is not it's not an easy piece of legislation either. So now you've got two large pieces of it, well, three, because you've got the Mission Act, you've got the PACT Act, and now you're going to have the Dole Act. All of them being implemented at a time when we're trying to get these services, and we've got to make sure that we're doing it right. And I'll tell you another issue that I'm going to be working on, and I don't know if you all have talked about it or not, and I've been dealing with this ever since I came to Congress. I did not realize that this was the case. See, if you go to the VA and you ask for, you get assigned a fiduciary. I don't know if you know this or not. You get assigned a fiduciary, automatic, because of the way their attorneys interpreted the Brady Bill from 35 years ago. You lose your Second Amendment rights. No due process, you lose them. So what we did was we used the budget and some of that to get it stopped for this last year. But we've got to make it permanent because another administration will come in. Hey, look, if a person is a danger to themselves or to others, there's a process. The same way a person never served in the military goes through that process. But why in the world should the people who actually fought to keep our constitutional rights have a constitutional right taken away without due process just because they're a veteran who needs help? And that's a bill that I'll be working on, and I have been working on. And I got so many of the left that tell me, oh, no, but you're just going to have more. No, you're not. No, you're not. The same thing happens in the civilian or non-military world. If a family member is a danger to themselves or others, there is a reporting process based on each state. That then fires up the judge to give a ruling on whether that's the case or not. Our veterans haven't had that for 35 years.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, the due process is absolutely.
And I'll tell you another problem that comes with that. Maybe not on the East Coast, maybe not on the West Coast, but in flyover country where I live, there's certain veterans that will say, you know what? I heard that I could lose my Second Amendment rights if I use the VA, and I'm not going to use the VA. That's not good. We want every veteran to use the services that are available to them. And then we need to make sure that those services are the best services that they can have.
It's interesting you're talking about concerns about Second Amendment rights and these issues, especially when it comes to violence And we're talking about veteran suicides, but we're starting to look at also what's going on with medications and violence. And this is not a very well kept secret here, but nobody's really talking about it or addressing it in a meaningful way. So again, we're very excited to have these conversations with you, incoming VA Secretary, and whatever we can do to support you and your team. We understand you have hearings coming up in late February. If there's any way we can support you or help you with those, we'd be honored to.
And I'm going to tell you, our staff is on board, and you know, I've got one of the best staffs on the Hill. I really do, and everybody knows it. And they know their veterans and know their veterans' issues, and are trying to make every day better for our veterans.
We're proud of you working with them.
Absolutely, Chairman. We want to say thank you for your time and the continued contributions to our country, both in uniform and as a legislative member.
Well, this corporal never thought he'd have a position of being the chairman of the VA committee, but somehow God's blessed me, and it's a blessing to work for all of our veterans.
There you go. And you represent it well, and you still have that Marine Corps grit, which I appreciate as a former Marine myself.
Simplify.
All right, my friends, that's it for Gaslighting the Warfighter. Now, we've covered a lot of great information here, my friends. It's time to get involved. Find your local representative, find ways of getting involved, get in with the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV, IAVA. The horizon is vast, but it ain't going to start until you take that first step and you get into the fight, because we need you, and we need you now more than ever, because we have a viable chance to make a significant change in the way that we address suicide, the way that we address mental health and overprescribing or the use of psychotropic medicines within our community. And hopefully there are some substantial learnings that we can take from this that we can apply to the larger part of this country that needs this desperately as well. So that is the charge, that is the mission, and that is what we're here to do. And I want to say thank you again to the chairman and all of the guests for this specific episodes of Gaslighting the Warfighter. Until next time, we'll see you then.
This has been Gaslighting the Warfighter. The Grunt Foundation continues fighting for those who have served. Support our mission at gruntstylefoundation.org/donate. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and keep moving forward with purpose.